Lebanon is undergoing a crisis. And this time, I'm not talking about the economy or the dismal state of Lebanese education or the rates of suicide or gang-related violence or domestic abuse or rape or citizenship or overpopulation or infrastructure, sectarianism, clean water, electricity, food scarcity, abortion, the environment, healthcare, the care of special needs citizens, diplomacy, job scarcity, or COVID. No. The topic I'd like to bring to your attention today is drug addiction. In my own survey of 21 classmates, 8 of them, almost 40%, said they personally knew someone who is or was addicted to illicit drugs. So I'd like to talk about drug addiction in Lebanon, specifically what we, collectively, can do about it. The idea that drug-addicted individuals should not have to pay for addiction with jail time is a controversial one. But what if I told you that the easiest and least expensive way to treat addicts was not to send them to jail, but to send them to rehabilitation instead? Popular opinion holds that drug addiction occurs when an individual uses the drug recreationally over the course of an extended period of time. However, this is a simplistic understanding of drug addiction. The truth is that while drugs do have addictive properties, there are people who have used hard drugs for extended periods of time and not been addicted, such as patients in hospitals, and there are people who have tried it once and were instantly hooked. So how do drugs really work? What's the secret that explains addiction? The answer lies not so much in chemistry as it does in psychology. Human beings are meant to bond, and when we don't bond with each other, studies show that we are prone to bonding with other things, such as food, plastic surgery, social media, sex, cigarettes, gambling, and illicit drugs. More and more, we live in an isolating society. According to Statistica, there is a global average of 33% of people this year saying they feel lonely, and that statistic is expected to rise. Therefore, it's no surprise that we are living in an increasingly drug-addicted world. Given the circumstance, we must recognize that drug addiction then is not an individual sin, but a natural and tragic response to a systemic failure. This also shifts the narrative of recovery from an individual battle to a social one. Because drug addiction is a psychosocial medical issue with structural societal causes and implications, drug addicts should be rehabilitated, not thrown in a jail cell where they would receive the scorn of society and be isolated further. It is not only social attitudes towards recovering addicts that make it harder on them. It's the never-ending shifts that deprive them of human connection and joy. It's the financial crisis, the lack of gasoline, the lack of food, the high rent and the high cost of living, the garbage, litter, crumbling infrastructure, the lack of education, and every other socio-political issue that devastates the Lebanese spirit. The epidemic of drug addiction in Lebanon is the result not only of social judgment, but also of structural neglect. Therefore, it is the moral responsibility of Lebanese society to rehabilitate our addicts. They may always have medical conditions, and they may never recover fully from the medical loss that they have endured at the hands of substance abuse. But to do anything we can is what they are owed by us. And certainly we are capable of progress. The president of Lebanon, Michel Aoun, has an estimated net worth of about $5 million US. The same applies to Samir Ja'ja, executive chairman of the Lebanese forces. Fuad Signora, predecessor to Ja'ja, is the owner of an estimated 1.3 million. Nabih Birri, of the Amal movement, has an estimated net worth of about $78 million individually, although his family is said to own about $2 billion collectively. Saad Hariri has an estimated net worth of a cool $1.6 billion. These are estimates based on what is known of their finances, which is clouded in secrecy and largely unknown to outsiders. In no capacity is rehabilitation in Lebanon a financially unfeasible dream. Even if it were expensive, it's still cost-effective in the long run. Rehabilitation would keep addicts out of jail, reducing the cost of prison spending. Information pertaining to the Lebanese context directly is difficult to find, but studies show that in the United States, if even 10 to 15% of addicts were rehabilitated instead of imprisoned, the United States would save approximately $48 billion a year. Drugabuse.gov, an American site, states, according to several conservative estimates, every dollar invested in addiction treatment programs yields a return of between $4 and $7 in reduced drug-related crime, criminal justice costs, and theft. When savings related to health care are included, total savings can exceed costs by a ratio of 12 to 1. Rehabilitating addicts would also make it easier for them to find jobs. This would help them individually, and it would help the economy. In the midst of an economic crisis, increasing the financial power of the Lebanese citizen is an obvious way to increase stability. This would keep addicts out of trouble and allow them to contribute again as functioning members of civil society. Rehabilitating addicts is better for their health physically and mentally. It's well known that incarceration is both physically unhealthy, acting as a jumbo-sized petri dish for diseases like COVID, and psychologically traumatic for the inmates. Not only would rehabilitation reduce prison crowding, it spares addicts from a fate that would make matters worse. For someone suffering from a heavily psychological medical condition, the last place they should be is in a prison. Rehabilitation of addicts is less traumatic for their families, which undoubtedly will have a positive effect on the psychological health of the overarching population. One of the great injustices of drug abuse is that it tears families apart, causing lasting damage to the hearts of spouses, parents, and young children. I ask you, is prison not isolating? And is prison not isolating to the children as well as the parent? By allowing addicts to rehabilitate instead, the cycle of intergenerational drug addiction can be broken. In conclusion, it is healthiest, not just for individuals, but for society as a whole, to fight the epidemic of drug addiction by offering rehab to addicts instead of jail time. Rehabilitation is not only the right of the addict, it is the responsibility of society. It is not only affordable, it saves money. Such programs could pay for themselves many times over. Where jail hurts the health of those who, by virtue of being addicts, are suffering in their health, rehabilitation saves it. Lastly, rehabilitation ends the cycle of isolation and trauma. It ends drug addiction not just in the individual, but in the lineage of the sufferer. Rehabilitation promotes family. It promotes healthy human connection, and that is the true antidote to addiction.